The screaming began at exactly 5:14 a.m. David Carter jolted awake, gasping for air, drenched in sweat as though he had been pulled from the ocean. His wife rushed to his side, holding his shoulders while he struggled to breathe. "It was just another nightmare," she whispered. David slowly nodded. His heartbeat steadied. His breathing returned to normal. Without saying another word, he quietly climbed out of bed. He walked downstairs, opened the kitchen drawer, picked up the largest knife he could find, then stepped outside. Security cameras later showed him calmly crossing the street toward a man walking home from work. There was no argument, no warning, no hesitation. Moments later, the man lay dead. When police tackled David to the ground, he never resisted. He only looked confused. Over and over again, he repeated the same sentence. "I don't remember leaving my bed." In the summer of 2018, an isolated coastal town became the center of one of the most disturbing unexplained cases in modern history. Ordinary people began committing unimaginable acts before collapsing in tears, unable to remember what they had done. Police blamed mental illness. Doctors blamed mass hysteria. Religious leaders called it demonic possession. But every survivor remembered the same nightmare. The investigation eventually led detectives back to a single afternoon, July 18, 2018, just 3 days before the first unexplained killing. 18-year-old Claire Harper was, by every account, an ordinary girl. She had just finished school for the summer and spent most of her time with her 2 closest friends. There was nothing unusual about her. That afternoon, after a violent storm battered the coastline, the 3 of them drove to a remote beach known for washing ashore strange objects from old shipwrecks. The shoreline was littered with broken driftwood, dead fish, tangled fishing nets, and smooth black stones polished by the sea. Then Claire noticed something half-buried beneath the wet sand. At first, she thought it was a piece of carved stone. As she pulled it free, seawater poured from its surface. It was an ancient idol no larger than both hands placed together. Dark green coral clung to its edges. Tiny seashells had fused into its surface. Its face was unlike anything recorded in local history. It had no eyes, only deep hollow sockets surrounded by symbols no one could identify. Despite spending centuries beneath the ocean, the idol felt strangely warm. One of her friends immediately stepped back. "Leave it." Another joked that anything looking that old belonged in a museum. Claire only smiled. She brushed away the remaining sand, slipped the idol into her backpack, and carried it home. No one on that beach realized they had just brought something back that should never have reached the surface. That night, Claire slept more peacefully than she had in weeks. The dream didn't begin with fear. It began with silence. She stood barefoot on the surface of a perfectly still ocean. Above her, the sky was empty. No stars, no moon, just darkness stretching forever. The sea beneath her was black as ink. Somewhere below, something enormous moved, not swimming, breathing. Each slow breath sent ripples across the endless water. Claire couldn't see it, but she knew it was watching her. Then a voice echoed from beneath the sea, soft, ancient, almost comforting. "You found me." The water trembled. The whisper came again. "You brought me home." Claire jolted awake. Her heart pounded against her chest. Her pajamas were soaked, as if she had fallen into the ocean. She switched on the bedside lamp. Small pools of water glistened across her bedroom floor. She stared at them in silence before convincing herself she must have been sleepwalking. She grabbed a towel, cleaned the floor, and returned to bed, never questioning where the seawater had come from. The dreams returned the following night, then the night after that. With each passing evening, they lasted a little longer. The endless black sea became more familiar. The unseen presence beneath the water drifted closer, and the whispers were no longer impossible to understand. Each morning, Claire woke remembering words she had never learned, sentences spoken in a language that didn't exist, yet somehow made perfect sense inside her mind. The dreams soon refused to stay asleep. She began hearing whispers while walking through the house. She would suddenly stop in the middle of a conversation, tilting her head as though someone invisible had called her name. She smelled salt water everywhere. Her bedroom, the kitchen, even inside the family car. More than once, her mother rushed upstairs after hearing water dripping through the ceiling, only to find the house completely dry. Claire started laughing at empty corners of rooms. Sometimes she stood perfectly still for hours, her eyes fixed on a blank wall, barely blinking. Other times, her parents found her awake long after midnight, staring through her bedroom window toward the distant ocean. When they asked what she was looking at, she simply smiled. The strangest moments came when she spoke. The words weren't English. They weren't any language experts would later recognize. Yet every sentence rolled off her tongue effortlessly, as though someone else had been speaking through her. Her parents wanted to believe it was stress or exhaustion, but deep down, they knew their daughter had not come home from the beach alone. 3 weeks after Claire brought the idol home, the nightmares spread. At first, only a few people reported them, then dozens. Soon, nearly everyone in town was afraid to fall asleep. Every survivor described the same dream: a lonely beach beneath a black sky, an endless ocean without waves, and a girl standing silently at the edge of the water. Her long hair completely covered her face. She never moved. She never spoke. She only lifted one arm and pointed toward the sea. The following morning, another tragedy would unfold. A husband turned violently against his own family. A teenager attacked a complete stranger without knowing why. Neighbors who had lived peacefully beside each other for decades suddenly became enemies. The violence appeared random. There was no pattern, no motive, only horror. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the invisible grip would release them. The people responsible would collapse to the ground, shaking uncontrollably. Many burst into tears. Some begged the police to tell them what they had done. Others refused to believe the evidence placed before them. Again and again, investigators heard the same desperate words: "I don't remember." As the number of victims grew, one terrifying detail never changed. Every one of them had seen the same girl, standing on the beach, her face hidden behind her hair. As the bodies piled up, the town became the center of a nationwide investigation. State police established a temporary command post. Psychologists interviewed every survivor. Neurologists searched for signs of poisoning or brain disease. Environmental experts tested the air, the water, and even the soil. Nothing explained what was happening. There were no drugs in the victims' systems, no infectious disease, no toxic chemicals, no evidence of occult or coordinated attacks. The victims came from different neighborhoods, different families, and different walks of life. Many had never even met, yet every interview uncovered the same impossible detail. Before each act of violence, they had all experienced the same dream: a deserted beach, a black ocean stretching beyond the horizon, and a young woman standing silently at the shoreline. Her face was completely hidden behind her long hair. She never chased them. She never threatened them. She simply stood there, pointing toward the sea. The investigators dismissed it as coincidence. But as more interviews were recorded, the similarities became impossible to ignore. Someone or something was visiting the entire town, one dream at a time. By the 4th week, Claire's parents stopped believing their daughter was sick. She barely touched her food. She never returned to school. She refused to leave her bedroom, except after midnight. Almost every night, they heard her walking through the house. Sometimes she laughed to herself. Sometimes she whispered as though someone was answering from the darkness. More than once, her father opened the bedroom door to find her speaking fluently in a language neither of them had ever heard. When she noticed them watching, she smiled. Then one night, they both had the dream. They stood together on the same empty beach. The ocean was silent. The air smelled of salt. Several feet away stood the same girl every witness had described. Her face remained hidden behind a curtain of dark hair. Slowly, she raised her head. The hair never moved. A whisper drifted across the water. "Show me your love." They both woke at exactly the same moment. But they were no longer in control. Claire's father reached for a lamp. Her mother grabbed a kitchen knife from the bedside table. Each believed the other had become a stranger. They attacked without hesitation. The nightmare finally broke only seconds before either could deliver the fatal blow. Terrified and shaking, they stumbled into the hallway. Claire was already there, standing perfectly still. She looked at them and laughed. It wasn't the laugh of an 18-year-old girl. It was deep, ancient, as though something that had slept beneath the ocean for centuries had finally found its voice. The following morning, Claire's parents made a decision they would carry for the rest of their lives. They packed only what they could fit into their car, locked the front door, and drove away. No goodbye, no forwarding address. No one in town ever saw them again. Before they disappeared, they visited a handful of neighbors and begged them to listen. "Our daughter is behind the nightmares. Our daughter is making people hurt each other." Most assumed grief had broken them. Others believed they were trying to protect Claire from suspicion. When police questioned them, they admitted they had no proof, only fear. The investigation went nowhere. Claire had never assaulted anyone. She had never been seen near any crime scene. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses placing her anywhere outside her own home. In fact, several neighbors insisted they hadn't seen her leave the house in weeks. Legally, Claire Harper was just another frightened teenager living in the middle of a town losing its mind. But as more people fell victim to the nightmares, one question became impossible to ignore. If she had never left her house, how was she reaching everyone in their sleep? After Claire's parents vanished, the town's collapse became impossible to hide. The violence grew worse with each passing week. Emergency calls flooded the police station day and night. No one wanted to go to sleep anymore. Families took turns staying awake to watch over one another. Some tied themselves to their beds before closing their eyes. Churches remained open throughout the night, filled with people praying for morning to come. Parents sat beside their children's beds until sunrise because the children were too terrified to sleep alone. None of it made any difference. The dreams always came. Eventually, survivors began talking to one another. At first in whispers, then in crowded meetings. Every story was identical. The same empty beach, the same endless black water, the same silent girl, her face hidden behind a curtain of dark hair, always standing at the shoreline, always pointing toward the sea. That was the moment everything changed. The town stopped asking whether the nightmares were real. They already knew the answer. Now, they believed the girl was real too. Fear eventually became anger. The people who had refused to leave the town reached the same conclusion. If Claire was responsible, then the nightmare had to end with her. Just before sunset, dozens of residents gathered outside her home. Some carried flashlights. Others carried hunting rifles, axes, and baseball bats. Without waiting for the police, they forced the front door open. The house was silent. The air smelled of seawater. Every room was empty. Claire's bedroom was exactly as her parents had left it. Her clothes were still in the closet. Her bed was neatly made, but there was no food in the kitchen, no fresh footprints, no sign that anyone had lived there for weeks. It was as if the house itself had been abandoned long before her parents fled. The search continued into the attic, the basement, even beneath the floorboards. Nothing. The girl had vanished. Yet every neighbor gave investigators the same statement. No one had seen Claire leave the house. Not once. It was as though she had simply disappeared. Police searched every place they could imagine. The surrounding forests, abandoned buildings, every road leading out of town. Divers even searched the coastline where Claire had found the ancient idol. Nothing. It was as though she had never existed. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the nightmares stopped. The killings stopped. The whispers disappeared. Sleep finally returned to the town. Months later, life slowly began to resemble normal again. Businesses reopened. Children returned to school. Families who had fled started coming home. With no suspects, no evidence, and no explanation, the investigation was officially closed. The idol was never recovered. Most people convinced themselves the nightmare was finally over. They were wrong. Years later, more than 100 miles from the abandoned town, a team of divers explored the wreck of an 18th century merchant ship resting on the ocean floor. Half buried beneath centuries of sand, one diver noticed something unusual. A small figure covered in coral. Ancient, beautiful, perfectly preserved. He brushed the sand away. The strange carvings across its surface began to glow. The diver smiled. For a moment, there was only silence. Then came the sound of gentle waves. A whisper echoed from the darkness. "You found me." Some prisons were never built to last, and some gods only need someone willing to bring them home.